Hi and welcome to another YouTube video. In today's video I want to show you my version or my attempt at recreating Rapunzel's tower from Tangled, and I can already tell you this was a difficult undertaking for multiple reasons, but the first one being the tower itself, because it's round and it is also pretty high and it is bigger at the base and then gradually gets thinner, and all of those things are things that we can't really quite do in The Sims. Like, first of all, we still don't have round walls, which makes building a round tower quite difficult, and we also only have 4 floors to work with. So with the 4 floors, it's kind of difficult to get that height that I would like to have, and also we can't do a gradual transition in width either. So I decided to go for an octagonal design instead of a round one, and I dedicated 3 of the 4 floors to the not the flower stem, the tower stem, if you can call it like that. So if basically the bloom of a flower would be the top, like most top room that's also like quite decorated and has a different appearance, then the tower stem would be just like this kind of beige looking base of the tower. I don't know if it makes sense, but I hope that maybe with the help of the reference photo, you know what I mean. And yeah, so the ground floor is the biggest one, and then to mimic the transition, I placed a roof on top of the ground floor that I pulled up as high as it can go, and then I curved it a little, and at first it looked really weird, but later I tried to disguise it as good as possible with a lot of plants, and it really helped. And also a lot of plants was very fitting because there was a lot of ivy covering the rest of the tower stem. Anyways, so yeah, but because I couldn't use the usual ivy on a roof, I kind of had to use bushes and had to like push them inwards to kind of follow the curvature of the roof, but that all worked quite well, but it did lead to some problems with the second story, but we'll get to that later. And yeah, afterwards I just needed to add some cracks and ivy to make it at least look quite similar to the reference photo, and I think for the tower stem that did work a little bit. And next up, so like the next step that I want to talk about was the landscaping, because as you can see in the reference photo, there are very high mountains in the back of the tower, and in my first 2 attempts, so like the footage that you're seeing is my 3rd attempt at building this, by the way. But yeah, in the first 2 attempts, I also tried to recreate that wall of stone in the background, but that made the tower look even smaller because, of course, the tower was smaller than the mountains, and then because it's like smaller than I wanted to be anyways, it made it look even smaller, so I didn't like it. So for my 3rd attempt I decided to go with like a little bit like smaller of a stone wall or a mountain wall, and I think the overall look of it, even though it's not as close to the reference photo, I do prefer. And yeah, so between these mountains and the hill that the tower is standing on, which I also did with like the terrain manipulation tool, there is a lake that we were able to do because of the pond tool, which is a lot of fun that I still like to work with a lot. I don't know why, but it's just so fun that now we can really like shape these water areas and the shape of them to our liking. I'm still so excited about this update, and how long has it been out yet? I don't know. But yeah, the most fun with the landscaping I had with the differently colored flower patches, because as you can see in the reference photo, there are these areas in front of the tower that have differently colored flowers, and I recreated that by filling the the ground with these base game flowers that are one of my favorite items, like in general, to use in any builds. Like these specific base game flowers, I hope I can kind of like show you which one I mean, or that you can understand. But yeah, I used them everywhere, covered the entire ground, and then I alternated between the different swatches, and I love the effect that it gives. And maybe I'll keep this like technique, if you can call it like that, in mind for different builds in the future, because it was a lot of fun to do, and it was like also super fast, and I think the effect is kind of cool. So yeah, it was a great way to make the landscaping look like special and like very detailed, very fast. So I really like that. But yeah, as you can see in the reference photo, it's not only ground covering with floor, there are also these very round bushes fitting to the color of the floor. So I decided to do that with these round bushes from Romantic Garden Stuff, I think it's called, and they were very fitting, and then I could place them where they needed to go in the fitting patches, and that was basically the landscaping done. And it was so fun because it was so easy. I then just like put in a few trees. I wanted to tilt one of the trees like to the side a little bit, because that's the way that it is in the reference picture, and I've done that with a different tree in a past build, and I know that it's very fun and that it kind of gives a very realistic look, because trees don't always just like go straight up, depending on how they like have the best access to the light. They also grow like very diagonally or in the weirdest shapes actually. But this time I was in a little bit of a conundrum, because there was this tree which is a get-together debug tree that fit the look of the tree that there was in the reference picture by far the best. Every other tree that there is in the regular tree menu doesn't really look close to the tree that there was in the reference image. But this tree, I don't know if it's because it's debug or why it is, but this one I couldn't tilt. Like I could just like rotate it around one axis, but none of the other axes, which was very sad. So I was debating, do I keep this tree that looks similar, or do I pick a different tree that looks very different but that I can tilt? And I decided to keep this tree. I don't know if that was the right decision. Maybe you can let me know what you would have done in the comments, and which option you prefer. But yeah, I decided to stick with this one. And of course, like on a slightly different topic, of course, this tower is famously only accessible by using Rapunzel's hair. So you probably have just seen me like maybe putting in a door and also a mailbox, because that's necessary for Sims builds. But yeah, so we couldn't really do the Rapunzel's hair thing. Yeah, that entire technique of like going up a rope or someone's hair is just hard to pull off in The Sims. And even though while touring these the builds that people have done for my November Shell Challenge recently, I came across this castle that The Sims Scrolls has built, and they did something there super smart with the jungle adventure portals. So there wasn't really a door, or so there wasn't really a staircase there or a door to access the build. Like, of course there was a door to the outside, but there wasn't a direct access. The access worked by the pathfinding with The Sims through the sized down jungle adventure portals. And now looking back on this build, this would have been something very smart that I could have done with it. So I would have just put a jungle adventure portal size down on the ground, and then the Sim would have like gone closer to the tower and then just teleported up to the topmost floor. But in this case, I decided to do something else. And yeah, I just decided to go for a normal door and stairs and ladders to go up, which is not as close to the original story because of course Rapunzel is like imprisoned there and stuff. But this has the big advantage that I was able to make the interior of the tower into a living space, because the look of the top room of the tower is dictated by the movie, and there is not really that many items in that room that we see that would help your Sims survive in this build, and there's not that much space around this like central room to add like maybe some functional rooms around it. So I decided to make this functional for gameplay. So if someone wants to use this for the Disney Princess Challenge or for something similar, they can use the tower as actual living space, and the topmost floor is more as like just like a movie reference, which I also really like. And that floor all the way on top, that is kind of like the main interior space of the tower in the movies, was very fun to decorate, especially the outside of it, which you can see me doing right now. And it also was a challenge, like everything with this build, because this topmost floor in the movie and the reference pictures is kind of 1.5 floors. I only had one to work with, so I kind of had to get creative. I tried my best to have, for example, separate peaks of the roof at the one side, where there also is like half a level like showing off the roof, and then has its own separate roof. Is basically just the separate roof without the extra level showing. Sadly, I would have loved to do it like this, but I couldn't quite figure it out. And then on the other side there is a chimney and stuff that I tried, and then the focal point is that little half balcony that Rapunzel like looks out at, and which is basically her main connection to the outside world while she is locked in there. And that one was very important, and when I first started working on that portion of the upper floor, I found this window that was kind of right. It was like turned out like to the outside and was kind of rounded, and it had some nice swatches. So first I decided to go for that, but when I came back to this build the next day, I looked at it and was like, no, this isn't quite right, and this is such an important part of the movie and of this tower, and it can really be a focal point for this build. So I went back and I deleted that window and I started over, and I really looked at the details. So of course everything is kind of surrounded by those flowers. I had already surrounded it when I still had that just window in place, so I could just keep that, but the window itself is kind of flat and it has this light brown tone and it has shutters, and then on top of that there is kind of like a curved roof. And yeah, lower down, of course, there is this balcony kind of thing, and on the two sides there is also this light wood color that the window has too. And so I found different assets, mostly from Cottage Living. So from Cottage Living I took the window, the balcony, and yeah, for the two wooden beams on the side. First I tried using columns, but that didn't quite work because they went all the way down the wall, like the whole length or height of the wall, and I wanted this kind of cabin to be separate. So what I decided to do was going with these wall decorations from Cottage Living that are kind of diagonal and have this beautiful carved shape, and I added them on top of each other in different like sizes, and so they formed this like very nice and intricate two columns that are very interestingly shaped. I don't know how accurate it is to the reference, but I somehow just liked it a lot better than the columns that went too far down. So I was happy with that. And then for the roof on top of it, I decided to go for that curved glass roof and also a light brown swatch that just like kind of brought it all together, even though it doesn't quite fit the style that I was going for with this, but it was the closest thing to what I wanted, because I couldn't use an actual roof in the middle of the floor. Like I could if I would have a floating room. So basically, when you draw two rooms on top of each other and then you delete the ground floor, you have a floor or a room where you can choose the height freely, and then you can place a roof on top of that, and when you delete the roof stays, and you can kind of put it into places where roofs don't normally go. And I know that technique, and I also tried to use it, but every time I would do anything on the interior, it would get deleted and I had to do the entire thing again. And also because it wasn't just the roof, but there also was still this piece of wall underneath that didn't look quite right, and for the way that it looked, it was just so much work and so much time, and I had to do it over and over again. It was glitched, and it wouldn't be nice for gameplay, because every time, for example, you would have a collectible in your gameplay and you would put it on a table or anything, that roof would get deleted as well. So at least in my game, I don't know if it's just my game that is glitched that way, but I decided against using it and just used this one, and I think it looks fine too. And with that, what are my final conclusions? What do I think of this build that I've done? What do I think of this recreation that I attempted? Do I think it's successful? Well, let's say that with this one, I did put a lot of pressure on myself, because I love Tangled, I love the movie, and I also love the whole story of Rapunzel, because I myself was called Rapunzel in elementary school a lot. I don't know if it was in a nice way or if in a mean way, but as a child I had hair that went to my knees, so I had very, very long hair and it was blonde and all, even though I don't think in the story, in the original fairy tale, Rapunzel's hair is necessarily blonde. I don't know which color it is, but it is in the Disney movie anyways. So yeah, I really wanted to get this right, and especially I wanted to get this right because this was made for another builder, another incredible simmer, Ripley, who donated to the Able Gamers charity stream. I talked about that a lot, or maybe too much, in the last voiceovers and stuff, but I did this one, and for $50 and up donations, people could request a custom build or a custom drawing from me, and Ripley decided to wish for the Rapunzel tower, the Tangled tower, and I was so on board. I was so hyped. I wanted to build this anyways, and so now I could also do it to say thank you to someone and build something that hopefully puts a smile on their face. So I really, really wanted to make this right and to make this be good, but on top of that I had very little time to build this because of real world stresses and stuff, so I don't do well under pressure, and I did put way too much pressure on myself with this one. And as you can probably tell already by the way that I'm starting this whole thing, and by me talking about this being my third attempt at building this, and the struggles that I had with the roof and stuff, I had a hard time with this one. I had fun, I had a lot of fun, and I do think the end result looks pretty, but it doesn't look as good as I would have wanted it to look, and it doesn't look as close to the reference as I want it to look, and I already now have things in my mind that I would want to do differently. And I didn't feel like on top of like my building game, I didn't feel the most creative with the challenges that stood before me with this recreation. So I kind of really want to do it again in maybe like half a year or something. Take this build as a base and then see which assets have come out or which updates have come out in The Sims until then, and kind of give it a second try, because I really think this could be better and I want to tackle this. Like, this is a challenge that I really want to destroy and really show you, and especially myself, that I as a builder am capable of recreating this and making it beautiful, and I feel like I haven't succeeded with it as much as I want to. Like, I really do not want to talk bad about this build, because I think that if you like talk nicely about your own creations, your own artworks and your own builds, that makes other people that maybe look up to you or maybe feel like they are on the same skill level or even a little bit above you feel better about yourself, about themselves, if you also like highlight the positives of the thing that you created, because then they say like, yeah, I can see those positives too. And in like, if I feel like my artwork is like on the same level or even like a little bit better, then that much must mean that I can be happy with the thing that I created too. And that is what I want to invoke in everybody, because every creation of course has flaws, but that doesn't mean that it isn't good. So I really do not like to talk negatively about my own creations in my voiceovers, because I want to say like, hey, I did this. I know it's not perfect, but I am proud of this, and whatever you create, you can be proud of it too. But this one, I'm just like, I'm not happy entirely with this build, and I know it can be better. And I know that I can do something better. Maybe it's just because I'm on that verge of learning a skill or improving in a skill, where you become very self-critical to the point of like taking a step back and creating slightly worse things than you did before, because you're so self-critical. But then you can take a whole leap, because basically your mind has already learned a lot of things and new things, but you can't quite execute it yet. And maybe I am currently at that point with my building skills where I'm ready to be better, where my mind is preparing to be better, but I'm just like, with my execution, I'm not quite there yet. And that's so frustrating. But yeah, I am definitely looking forward to making improvements in the future, and maybe revisiting this build with more time, with maybe more creative ideas. I'm going to keep the struggles that I had with this build in the back of my mind and kind of work on creative solutions, or maybe really take a lot of time to familiarize myself even more with the debug menu and the items that are in there, to kind of like make a mental note every time that I see a debug item that I could use here to improve this. And then I swear to you and I promise you, I'm going to get back to this and I'm going to make it really good. Now I'm already putting pressure on myself again, which is maybe not a smart thing to do, but I hope that even though I'm not 100% happy with this, you like this build, and I hope that you enjoyed this video and that I, hopefully put a little smile on your face, even though the end of this one was slightly a bit negative, but criticism is important too. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked and enjoyed this. If you would consider subscribing and continuing this journey of getting better at building in The Sims with me, please do. You would make me super duper happy, and I hope we'll see each other again.